My name is Caleb Rivers, and I never thought I'd walk into my own house and feel like a stranger. But that's exactly what happened on a Tuesday afternoon when I forgot my phone on the kitchen counter. I'd been at the office all morning, pushing through paperwork for a construction deal, and I figured I'd swing by home during lunch to grab it. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway, the kind of quiet that usually meant Juliana was out shopping or meeting her rich friends for coffee. I didn't think much of it as I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, my boots tapping against the hardwood floor I'd installed myself 3 years ago. I grabbed the phone, checked a few messages, and decided to head upstairs to change my shirt. Sweat was sticking to my back from the morning's heat. That's when I heard it, a soft laugh, her laugh, drifting from our bedroom. My stomach twisted a little, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was on the phone or watching one of those reality shows she loved. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight, and pushed open the bedroom door, the one I shouldn't have opened. There they were. Juliana, my wife of 6 years, tangled up in my brother Damien's arms, their lips locked like they'd forgotten the world existed. The room smelled like her perfume, the expensive kind she'd bought with my credit card last month, and the bed, our bed, was a mess of sheets I'd paid for. My heart didn't race, it just sank, heavy and slow, like a stone dropping into a lake. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in whatever this was, but then Damien's eyes flicked up, and he froze. Juliana turned her head, her dark hair falling over her shoulder, and instead of jumping away or stammering excuses, she smirked. She wiped her lips with the back of her hand, slow and deliberate, and said, "Well, Caleb, looks like you caught us. You can cry in court. You can't do anything about it." Her voice was sharp, dripping with that confidence she always had when she thought she'd won something. Damien just stood there, his shirt half unbuttoned, looking at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I could have yelled, could have thrown a punch, could have torn the room apart, but I didn't. My hands stayed in my pockets, my face stayed blank, and I let the silence stretch out until it choked the air. They expected me to break. Juliana leaned against the headboard, crossing her arms like she was waiting for me to beg her to stay, to fight for her, to give her the reaction she could twist into some story for her friends. Damien shifted his weight, his jaw tight, probably wondering if I'd swing at him. I didn't. I looked at them, my wife and my brother, 2 people I'd trusted with everything, and felt something click inside me. Not anger, not yet, but a cold, clear thought. They'd just handed me a way out. I didn't say a word. I turned around, walked back downstairs, and grabbed my keys off the counter. Juliana called after me. "What, no tantrum? You're just gonna run away?" I didn't answer. I stepped outside, the afternoon sun hitting my face, and got in my truck. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but my mind was already moving, already planning. They thought I was weak because I didn't scream. They didn't know I was about to build something stronger than anything they could tear down. I drove to a diner a few miles away, the one with the cracked leather booths and coffee that tasted like burnt toast. I sat there, staring at the menu without reading it, letting the noise of clinking plates and chatter fill the space where my thoughts should have been. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that said Marge, asked if I was okay. I nodded, ordered a burger I didn't eat, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through contacts until I found Zara Holt, my late mom's friend and the best lawyer I knew. She picked up on the second ring, her voice steady and familiar. "Caleb, what's wrong?" she asked, like she could hear it in my silence. I told her everything: Juliana, Damien, the bedroom, the smirk. She didn't gasp or curse, she just listened. When I finished, she said, "Come see me tomorrow. We'll figure this out." I hung up, paid for the uneaten food, and drove to a cheap motel off the highway. That night, lying on a lumpy mattress with the hum of the air conditioner buzzing in my ears, I didn't cry. I didn't sleep much either. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying Juliana's words, "You can't do anything about it," and decided she was wrong. I could do plenty. I'd start by giving them exactly what they didn't expect, an exit so easy they'd choke on it later. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. I woke up in that motel room with the taste of stale air in my mouth and the weight of yesterday pressing on my chest, but I didn't let it crush me. My name's Caleb Rivers, and I just caught my wife Juliana kissing my brother Damien in our bedroom, her smirk still echoing in my head like a taunt I couldn't shake. I could have gone back home, stormed in, and demanded answers, but that's what they wanted. Me loud, me messy, me giving them something to fight against. Instead, I showered in the motel's tiny bathroom, the water barely warm, and pulled on the same clothes from yesterday. My phone buzzed with a text from Juliana. "Where'd you run off to, coward?" I didn't reply. I tossed the phone on the bed, grabbed my keys, and headed to Zara Holt's office downtown. The morning sun was climbing over the city, casting long shadows on the pavement, and I felt something shift inside me, not rage, not yet, but a quiet kind of strength I hadn't tapped into before. Calm was my weapon now, and I was going to wield it like a blade. Zara's office was on the 5th floor of an old brick building, the kind with creaky elevators and faded carpet. She was waiting for me when I walked in, her gray hair pulled back tight and her desk covered in files. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Sit," she said, pointing to a chair across from her. I did, and she leaned forward, her eyes sharp like she could see right through me. "Tell me everything again, slow this time." So I did. I told her about coming home early, about the bedroom door, about Juliana's lips on Damien's and her smug little threat about crying in court. Zara didn't flinch. She scribbled notes on a yellow pad, her pen scratching the paper, and when I finished, she looked up and said, "They think they've got you cornered, Caleb. Let them. Arrogance like that, it's a shovel. We'll just stand back and watch them dig their own grave." I nodded, feeling the first real breath of relief since yesterday. She asked for details, dates, times, anything I'd seen or heard, and I gave her what I could. Then she told me to go home, act normal, and start keeping track of everything. "Evidence," she said. "That's your power now." I drove back to the house, my truck rumbling through the quiet streets, and pulled into the driveway like nothing had changed. The front door was unlocked, and I stepped inside to find Juliana sprawled on the couch in one of my old flannel shirts, her legs stretched out like she owned the place. Damien was in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge, my fridge, pulling out a beer I'd bought last week. "Look who's back," Juliana said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Decided to stop sulking?" I didn't bite. I walked past her, grabbed a glass of water, and headed upstairs. She called after me. "What, no fight? You're pathetic." I kept moving. Damien laughed, a low, smug sound, and I heard the beer can crack open. They thought they were winning. I let them. I went to the guest room, the one with the single bed and the dusty blinds, and dropped my bag on the floor. That night, they stayed in the master bedroom, my bedroom, giggling and whispering like teenagers, while I lay on the stiff mattress and stared at the ceiling. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't need to. My mind was busy, turning over Zara's words, mapping out what came next. The next morning, I started documenting. I pulled out my phone and made a note. Wednesday, 8:14 a.m. Juliana wearing my shirt, Damien drinking my beer. I kept it simple, just facts, no feelings. I went downstairs, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table while they stumbled out of the bedroom, hair messy and eyes bleary. Juliana smirked at me over her mug, like she was daring me to snap. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. Damien plopped into my chair, the one at the head of the table, and stretched his arms like he belonged there. "You're quiet today, bro," he said, grinning. I shrugged. "Just thinking," I said, and left it at that. They didn't know I was watching every move, every word, storing it up like bricks for a wall they'd never see coming. I went to work after that, spent the day at the construction site, hammering nails and hauling lumber, letting the physical ache drown out the noise in my head. When I got home, Juliana was on the phone, laughing loud, probably telling her friends how she'd broken me. I added it to my notes. 6:32 p.m. Juliana bragging on call. Days turned into a week, and I kept my routine. Work, home, guest room, silence. Juliana and Damien got bolder, leaving dishes in the sink, blasting music late, acting like I was a ghost in my own house. I didn't clean up after them. I didn't complain. I just watched. Zara called me on Friday, her voice crisp through the line. "How's it going?" she asked. I told her about the notes, the way they were flaunting it. "Good," she said. "Keep it up. We're building something solid here." I hung up and went back to the guest room, pulling out a notebook I'd started using when my phone wasn't enough. I wrote down times, conversations, even the way Juliana's eyes flicked to Damien when she thought I wasn't looking. They were so sure I'd crack, so sure I'd beg her to stop, to come back to me. She didn't get it. I wasn't begging for anything. I was letting her think she'd won, letting her strut around in my shirts in my house, because every step she took was one closer to the edge. One night, I heard them arguing in the bedroom, muffled voices, sharp and fast. I cracked the guest room door and listened. "He's not even fighting, Damien," Juliana snapped. It's like he doesn't care. Damien muttered something I couldn't catch, and she laughed, bitter and loud. Maybe he's just weak. I closed the door, leaned against it, and smiled to myself. Weak? No. I was calm, and that was stronger than anything they could throw at me. I climbed back into bed, the notebook tucked under my pillow, and let the sound of their voices fade into the dark. They didn't know it yet, but I was already 3 steps ahead. Zara was right. They were digging, and I was just waiting to hand them the dirt. I'm Caleb Rivers, and by the second week of sleeping in the guest room, I'd turned into a shadow in my own house, a ghost they couldn't touch, no matter how hard they tried to rattle me. Juliana and Damien were still strutting around like they'd won some grand prize, and I let them. I'd come home from the construction site, my hands rough from hauling lumber, and find her wearing my shirts, the ones I used to wear on lazy Sundays, now stretched across her like some kind of trophy. She'd parade past me, hips swaying, smirking like she was waiting for me to snap. Damien wasn't much better. He'd taken to driving my truck around town, parking it crooked in the driveway, and sitting in my chair at the dinner table like he was king of the castle. I didn't say a word. I'd pour myself a glass of water, nod if they spoke, and drift upstairs to the guest room, leaving them to their little show. They thought they were breaking me down, but I was the one pulling strings they didn't even see. Juliana started pushing harder, trying to get a rise out of me. One night, I was in the kitchen heating up leftovers, chicken I'd cooked the day before, when she came stomping in, her voice loud enough to wake the neighbors. "You're so boring, Caleb," she said, leaning against the counter, her arms crossed. No wonder I needed Damien. I kept stirring the pot, the steam rising between us, and didn't look up. She huffed, then turned the volume up a notch, moaning fake and loud like she was auditioning for a bad movie, glancing at me to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I plated my food, sat at the table, and ate while she stood there, her face twisting from smug to annoyed. Damien wandered in, shirtless, scratching his stomach, and grinned at her performance. "Give it up, Jules," he said. "He's checked out." I chewed my chicken, swallowed, and took a sip of water. Checked out? Maybe. But I wasn't gone. I was just somewhere they couldn't reach. I kept documenting everything, like Zara told me to. My notebook was filling up fast. Monday, 7:45 p.m., Juliana moaning to provoke me, Damien laughing. Tuesday, 9:12 a.m., Damien took my truck again, came back with mud on the tires. Every detail went in, clean and simple, no emotion, just facts. I'd started moving things too quietly, piece by piece. My bank accounts, the ones Juliana didn't know about, got shifted to new passwords she'd never guess. The house was mine, bought with money from my dad's inheritance before we even met, and I'd never put her name on the deed. She thought she had a claim because she'd spent her own cash on furniture and paint, but legally, she had nothing. Zara was working on the rest, stocks, the car titles, the prenup she'd signed 6 years ago when she was too in love to read the fine print. I'd call Zara every few days, keeping my voice low in the guest room, and she'd update me. "We're almost there, Caleb. Just keep playing dead." One afternoon, I reached out to Layla Kim, my old friend from high school who'd turned into this big-shot interior designer. We'd lost touch after I married Juliana, but I found her number in an old email and dialed it on my lunch break, sitting in my truck with the windows down. She picked up, her voice bright and surprised. "Caleb, is that you?" I told her I was redoing the house soon, needed her help picking out new stuff, paint, furniture, the works. She didn't ask about Juliana, just said, "I'm in. When do you want to start?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Soon," I said. "Real soon." That night, I came home to find Juliana and Damien sprawled on the couch, some loud movie blaring, empty takeout boxes scattered on the coffee table. I stepped over the mess, went upstairs, and sketched out ideas for the renovation in my notebook: new floors, a bigger kitchen, a bedroom I'd never share with her again. They didn't know it, but I was already building a life without them. Juliana tried starting fights, too, like she couldn't stand the silence. One evening, I was folding laundry in the guest room, my clothes, not hers, when she barged in, hands on her hips. "What's your problem, Caleb? You think you're better than me now?" I kept folding, lining up my shirts in neat stacks, and said, "No problem. Just living." She glared, her nails digging into her palms. "You're a coward. You won't even look at me." I met her eyes then, steady and calm, and she faltered, just for a second. "I see you," I said, and went back to my shirts. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Downstairs, I heard her snap at Damien. He's driving me crazy. I almost laughed. Crazy? She didn't know the half of it. I was driving her out, slow and steady, and she was too blind to see the exit sign. Damien kept up his act, too, like he was proving something. He'd leave his boots by the front door, muddy and scuffed, right where I'd trip over them. He'd crank the TV volume late at night, knowing I had work early. I'd hear him muttering to Juliana, "He's gonna crack soon. Watch." I didn't. I'd get up, go to the site, hammer nails into boards until my arms ached, and come home to add more notes. Thursday, 11:03 p.m., Damien loud on purpose, Juliana egging him on. They were squatting in my house, living off my patience, and I let them because every day they stayed was another nail in their coffin. Zara called me that Friday, her voice sharp with progress. "We've got the eviction papers ready," she said. "You sure about this?" I leaned against the guest room wall, the phone pressed to my ear, and said, "Yeah, it's time." She chuckled, low and satisfied. "Good. They won't know what hit them." That night, I lay in the guest room, the house quiet for once, and thought about Layla's voice on the phone, the way she'd sounded excited to help me start over. I thought about the new floors I'd put in, the paint I'd pick, something bright, something mine. Juliana and Damien were downstairs, probably plotting their next move, thinking they had me trapped. They didn't. I was the one holding the keys, and soon, I'd lock them out for good. I closed my eyes, the notebook under my pillow, and let the calm settle over me like a blanket. Ghosting a marriage wasn't about disappearing. It was about fading away until they realized they'd lost me long before I left. I'm Caleb Rivers, and after weeks of playing the ghost in my own house, the day finally came to drop the hammer, or rather, the eviction notice, on Juliana and Damien. I'd been sleeping in the guest room, listening to their laughter and arguments seep through the walls, watching them strut around like they owned everything I'd built. My hands were steady now, not shaking like they did that first night I caught them kissing in our bedroom. I'd met with Zara Holt the day before, her office cluttered with papers and coffee cups, and she'd slid the eviction notice across her desk with a grin. "It's ready," she said, tapping the document. "Your name's on the deed, Caleb. They've got no leg to stand on." I'd nodded, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest, not heavy, but solid, like a brick I'd been waiting to lay. I took the papers, folded them into my jacket, and drove home, knowing this was the moment they'd realize their game was up. I walked into the house that afternoon, the sun still high outside, casting sharp light through the windows. Juliana was in the living room, flipping through a magazine, her feet propped up on the coffee table I'd refinished last summer. Damien was sprawled on the couch, scrolling his phone, a half-empty beer can sweating on the armrest. They barely looked up when I stepped in, like I was just part of the furniture now. I set my keys on the counter, louder than usual, and pulled the envelope from my jacket. "Juliana," I said, my voice flat but clear. She glanced up, one eyebrow raised, and smirked. "What? You finally got something to say?" I didn't answer with words. I walked over and dropped the eviction notice in her lap, the paper landing with a soft thud against her magazine. She stared at it for a second, then laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "What's this supposed to be?" she asked, picking it up like it was a joke. "Read it," I said, stepping back to lean against the wall, my arms crossed. Damien sat up, suddenly interested, his beer forgotten. Juliana ripped the envelope open, her nails catching on the paper, and scanned the words. Her smirk faded fast, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then anger. "Eviction notice?" she spat, holding it up like I'd handed her trash. "You wouldn't dare." I met her eyes, calm as ever, and said, "I already did." Her mouth opened, then closed, like she couldn't find the right comeback. Damien snatched the paper from her, his brow furrowing as he read it, muttering, "This can't be legal." Juliana shot to her feet, the magazine sliding to the floor, and pointed at me. "My name's on the deed, Caleb. You can't just kick me out of my own house." I didn't flinch. "It's not your house," I said. "It never was. Check the paperwork." She froze, her hand still in the air, and I saw the doubt creep in. She'd always assumed she had a claim, her rich daddy's money had bought half the stuff inside. Sure. But the house itself? That was mine, paid for with my inheritance, signed in my name alone. The prenup she'd breezed through years ago didn't give her a dime of it either. Damien stood up now, tossing the notice on the couch. "You're bluffing," he said, stepping closer, his chest puffed out like he could scare me into backing down. I didn't move. It's not a bluff, I said. You've got 30 days. Start packing. Juliana laughed again, but it was shaky this time, her confidence cracking. You think you can just throw us out? I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. I shrugged. Go ahead. Zara's already got everything locked down. Her eyes narrowed at the mention of Zara. She knew my mom's old friend was a shark in court, and for the first time, I saw real fear flicker across her face. They didn't take it quietly after that. Juliana stormed around the living room, yelling about how I couldn't do this, how I'd regret it, how she'd drag me through the mud. Damien paced behind her, muttering curses, kicking at the furniture like a kid throwing a tantrum. I stood there, watching, letting them burn out their energy. You're nothing without me, Juliana snapped, spinning to face me. You think you can just erase 6 years? I looked at her, at the woman I'd once loved, and said, You erased it, not me. That shut her up for a second, long enough for Damien to jump in. You're a coward, Caleb, he said, his voice low and mean, hiding behind papers instead of facing us like a man. I almost smiled. Facing them? I'd been facing them every day, eating their insults, sleeping under their noise, and now I was done. I'm not hiding, I said. I'm just cleaning house. I didn't stick around for more. I grabbed a duffel bag from the guest room, stuffed it with clothes and my notebook, and walked out. Juliana shouted after me, Where the hell are you going? I didn't answer. I climbed into my truck, the one Damien hadn't touched today, and drove off, leaving them with the notice and their panic. I'd already rented a small apartment downtown, a one-bedroom with bare walls and a view of the city lights. I dropped my bag on the floor, cracked open a window, and let the cool air wash over me. My phone buzzed. Zara, checking in. How'd they take it? She asked. I leaned against the wall, the concrete cold through my shirt, and said, like you'd expect, screaming. Threats. She chuckled. They'll scramble now. Keep your head down. I told her I would, hung up, and sat on the edge of the bed, the eviction notice's words running through my mind. 30 days to vacate. That night, I didn't sleep much, but it wasn't anger keeping me up. It was relief. I'd moved out before they could be served officially, left behind the memories soaked into that house, and taken the first real step towards something new. Juliana and Damien would fight, sure, but Zara had the prenup, the deed, the proof. They'd scramble, just like she said, grasping at straws they didn't have. I thought about the bedroom, the way Juliana's perfume still clung to it, the way Damien's boots had scuffed the floors. Let them have it for 30 more days. After that, it'd be mine again, mine to gut, to rebuild, to make into something they'd never touch. I lay back, the city hum drifting through the window, and closed my eyes. They thought I'd beg, that I'd cling to what we had. Instead, I'd given them an exit, and soon, they'd see how easy I'd made it to fall. I'm Caleb Rivers, and after dropping the eviction notice on Juliana and Damien, I moved into that downtown apartment with nothing but a duffel bag and a chance to start over. The place was small, bare walls, a creaky bed, a kitchen with a stove that barely worked, but it was mine, free of their noise and their mess. I'd left the house behind, let them stew in it for the 30 days they had left, and turned my focus inward. The first morning, I woke up to the sound of traffic instead of Juliana's taunts, and it felt like a weight had lifted off my chest. I didn't waste time. I hit the gym down the street, a gritty place with rusted weights and cracked mirrors, and started lifting, pushing my body until the ache drowned out the echoes of her smirk. I signed up for therapy too, meeting a guy named Dr. Ellis who didn't sugarcoat things. You're not broken, he said in our first session, leaning back in his chair. You're just pissed. Use it. So I did. I was rebuilding, piece by piece, and it felt good. I started cooking again, something I hadn't done since Juliana took over the kitchen with her takeout boxes and complaints. I found a class at the community center, simple stuff, like roasting chicken and chopping vegetables, and showed up with a notebook, scribbling recipes while the instructor, a wiry woman named Maria, cracked jokes about burning water. I liked the routine, the way the knife felt in my hand, the smell of garlic sizzling in a pan. It was mine, not theirs. One night, I made a decent pasta dish, sat at my tiny table, and ate alone, the city lights blinking outside. I didn't miss the chaos of the house, just the quiet I was carving out now. Then came the podcast. I'd been tossing the idea around with Dr. Ellis, something to let the anger out without punching walls. I called it Quiet Exit, recorded it on a cheap mic in my apartment, and talked about betrayal, mine, anonymous, no names. The first episode was rough, just me rambling about walking away, but I uploaded it anyway. A week later, it had 1,000 downloads. Then 10,000. People left comments. This hit hard. You're not alone. I kept going, recording late at night, my voice steady, the words spilling out like they'd been waiting. Layla Kim started showing up more, too. After that call about the house renovation, she texted me a few days later, asking how I was holding up. I told her about the apartment, the eviction, and she didn't pry, just said, "You deserve a fresh start, Caleb." She came by one afternoon with paint swatches and a sketch pad, her dark hair tied back, her energy calm but warm. We sat on the floor, spreading out ideas for the house, new floors, a bigger window in the kitchen, a bedroom with no trace of Juliana. "You've got good taste," she said, smiling as I picked a deep blue for the walls. I shrugged. "Just wanted to feel like me." She nodded, like she got it, and stayed for coffee, the conversation drifting to old high school memories, football games, sneaking beers by the river. It wasn't rushed, wasn't anything more than it needed to be, but her presence felt steady, like an anchor I didn't know I'd been missing. Then Juliana showed up. It was a Thursday, 2 weeks after the notice, and I was coming back from the gym, sweat still clinging to my shirt. She was leaning against my apartment door, her arms crossed, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying. "Caleb," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard in months. I stopped, keys in hand, and waited. She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the hallway floor, and said, "I need to talk to you." I unlocked the door, let her in, but didn't sit, just stood by the counter, watching her. She paced, twisting her hands, then turned to me with those crocodile tears I knew too well. "Damien meant nothing," she said, her eyes wide. "It was a mistake. I don't want to lose us." I almost laughed. Us? There hadn't been an us since she climbed into bed with my brother. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and said, "You already lost it, Juliana. You just didn't notice." She blinked, like she hadn't expected that, and the tears stopped fast. "You're really doing this?" she asked, her voice hardening. "Throwing me out, acting like I'm the bad guy?" I didn't flinch. "You made your choice. I'm making mine." She stared at me, her lips tight, then tried a different angle. "I'll fight the eviction. I'll take you to court. You can't just erase me." I shrugged. "Zara's got it covered. You signed the prenup." Her face twisted, anger flashing now, and she stepped closer, pointing at me. "You think you're better than me now? Some big man with your little apartment and your quiet act." I met her eyes, calm and steady, and said, "I'm not better. I'm just done." She froze, her hand dropping, and for a second, I saw the panic, real panic, behind her mask. Then she turned, stormed out, and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there, the silence settling back in, and felt lighter than I had in weeks. She'd come looking for a crack to slip through, a way to pull me back. But I wasn't the same Caleb she'd smirked at in the bedroom. I'd been lifting weights, cooking meals, pouring my story into a mic, growing into something she couldn't touch. That night, I recorded a new Quiet Exit episode, talking about how betrayal doesn't end you, it remakes you, if you let it. The downloads spiked again, messages pouring in from people who'd been there, who got it. Layla texted me later, asking how the podcast was going, and I sent her the link. "Proud of you," she replied, and I smiled at the screen, the glow of it lighting up the darkroom. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving, step by step, in ways Juliana never saw coming. She thought I'd beg, that I'd crumble without her. Instead, I was building a life she'd never fit into, one where her tears and her threats bounced off me like rain on a roof. The gym, the kitchen, the podcast, Layla's quiet support, it was all mine, and it was growing. I lay back on the bed, the city humming outside, and closed my eyes. 30 days were ticking down, and when they were up, I'd walk back into that house a different man. She'd regret underestimating me, but by then, I'd be too far gone to care. I'm Caleb Rivers, and as the 30 days of the eviction notice ticked down, the mess Juliana and Damien had made started spilling beyond the walls of my house, right into the family I'd once thought was unbreakable. I've been living in my downtown apartment for a few weeks now, lifting weights, cooking meals, and pouring my thoughts into Quiet Exit, the podcast that was picking up steam faster than I'd expected. The city noise outside my window had become a comfort, a steady hum that drowned out the echoes of Juliana's taunts and Damien's smug laughter. I'd figured they'd fight the eviction, maybe claw at each other as their little affair unraveled, but I didn't expect the fallout to hit the rest of us so hard. It started with a phone call from my dad, his voice rough and low, the kind he used when he was too mad to shout. "Caleb," he said, "no hello, no warm-up. Is it true about Damien and Juliana?" I leaned against my kitchen counter, the phone pressed to my ear, and said, "Yeah, Dad." Caught them myself. There was a long pause, then a curse so sharp it made me flinch. "He's no son of mine," he said, and hung up. I stood there, staring at the phone, the weight of his words sinking in. My dad wasn't a soft man. Grew up hauling lumber, built our family with calloused hands, but he'd always held Damien close, the baby of the three of us kids. Me, the oldest, steady and quiet. Sarah, the middle, off in California with her own life. And Damien, the wild one who'd coasted on charm and Dad's patience. That was over now. I didn't call back. Didn't need to. I knew Dad meant it, and part of me felt a grim satisfaction, like a knot in my chest loosening. I'd lost a brother, sure, but I wasn't the only one cutting ties. The next day, Sarah texted me. "Dad's pissed. Told me Damien's out of the will. You okay?" I wrote back, "Yeah, I'm good. How's he holding up?" She said, "He's quiet." That's worse. I could picture him, sitting in his old recliner, staring at the TV without seeing it, the betrayal chewing at him like it had me. I didn't feel sorry for Damien, not after what he'd done, but I wondered how deep the fracture would go. Word spread fast after that. My buddies from the construction site, guys I'd known since high school, started asking questions. "Heard your wife's with your brother now," Mike said one morning, handing me a coffee as we unloaded planks. "That true?" I nodded, kept my eyes on the wood. "Yeah, they're out soon, though." He clapped my shoulder, didn't push, just said, "You're better off, man." They stopped inviting Juliana to the barbecues and bonfires, the ones she used to crash with her loud laugh and designer bags. Damien got the cold shoulder too. No more beers with the crew, no more showing up unannounced. The town wasn't big, and people talked. I'd catch whispers at the gym, the grocery store. Caleb's wife cheated with his own brother. He's handling it like a saint. I didn't feel like a saint, just a guy who'd learned to keep his fists down and his head up. Juliana tried spinning it, of course. I got wind of it through Layla, who'd heard it from a mutual friend. "She's telling people you were cold," Layla said one night, sitting across from me in my apartment with a pizza box between us. "Says you pushed her to Damien because you didn't care enough." I snorted, grabbing a slice. "Cold." She was kissing him in my bed. Layla shook her head, her dark eyes steady. "No one's buying it, Caleb. They know you." She was right. The story didn't stick. Too many people had seen me at my lowest, picking up the pieces, and Juliana's act was wearing thin. Her rich friends, the ones she'd bragged to about winning, started dodging her calls. I heard from Mike's wife that Juliana showed up at a charity lunch, all smiles and heels, and got nothing but polite nods and quick exits. She was burning bridges with gasoline, and I didn't have to lift a finger to help. Zara called me midweek, her voice crisp and businesslike. "We're wrapping up the loose ends," she said. "Joint accounts, investments, she's out of all of it. Prenups holding like steel." I was at the gym, wiping sweat off my face, the clank of weights behind me. "Good," I said. "What she got left?" Zara laughed, short and dry. "Her money, her clothes, and a whole lot of regret she won't admit yet." I thanked her, hung up, and went back to the bench press, pushing the bar up until my arms burned. Juliana had her inheritance, sure. Her dad's cash had kept her floating. But the influence, the respect, the life she'd built on my back, that was crumbling. I didn't need to see it to know it. The podcast was proof enough. Quiet Exit hit 20,000 downloads that week, people messaging me about their own betrayals, thanking me for saying what they couldn't. I wasn't just cutting her out of my accounts. I was cutting her out of my world. Layla came by again that weekend, sketches for the house in hand. We sat on my couch, the eviction clock ticking down to a week left, and she spread out plans, new cabinets, a porch swing, a fireplace I'd always wanted. "It's gonna be yours again," she said, tapping the paper. "No ghosts." I looked at her, the way she smiled without pushing, and felt something warm settle in me. "Thanks, Layla," I said. She nodded, didn't make it a thing, just kept talking design. Later, I walked her to her car, the night air cool, and she hugged me. Quick, friendly, but enough to linger in my head after she drove off. I went back inside, recorded a new episode about family breaking apart, and slept better than I had in months. Juliana's empire was shrinking, and mine was growing, quietly, steadily, without her shadow. Dad's silence, Sarah's check-ins, the crew's loyalty. It was a net catching me as I climbed. She'd thought she could rewrite me into the villain, but the truth was too loud, and I didn't need to shout it. I lay in bed that night, the city buzzing outside, and thought about the house, soon to be empty of them. I'd walk in, rip out their stains, and build something new. The fallout wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs, and they were sinking under it, one burned bridge at a time. I'm Caleb Rivers, and the day Juliana and Damien's 30 days ran out, I found myself standing in a courtroom, the air thick with tension and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I'd been building toward this for weeks, living in my downtown apartment, lifting weights, cooking meals, letting quiet exit grow while Zara Holt pulled every legal string to cut Juliana out of my life. The house was empty now. They'd moved out the day before, leaving behind scratched floors and a few broken dishes. Like a final jab, I didn't bother to dodge. I didn't go back yet. Layla and I had plans to gut it soon. But today wasn't about the house. It was about the divorce, the prenup, and watching Juliana's smirk finally crack. I walked into the courthouse in a plain suit Zara had told me to wear, my hands steady, my mind clear. This wasn't a fight. It was a finish line. The room was cold, all gray walls and stiff chairs, with a judge perched up front who looked like he'd seen 1,000 stories like mine. I sat next to Zara, her briefcase open, papers stacked neat and ready. Juliana was across the aisle, dressed in designer everything. Black dress, heels, a necklace that probably cost more than my truck. She looked like she'd stepped out of one of her charity galas, not a courtroom where her life was about to unravel. Damien sat behind her, slouched in a cheap jacket, his eyes darting around like he wasn't sure why he was there. I caught Juliana's gaze once, and she smirked, that same smug twist of her lips I'd seen in the bedroom weeks ago. She thought she had something up her sleeve, some way to turn this around. I didn't flinch. I just waited, letting her stew in her own confidence while Zara adjusted her glasses and gave me a nod. "We've got this," she whispered. I believed her. The judge called us up, his voice flat and tired, and Juliana's lawyer went first, a slick guy with a shiny tie and too much cologne. He stood, smoothed his jacket, and started spinning a tale about me being distant, neglectful, driving Juliana into Damien's arms. "Mr. Rivers abandoned the marriage long before my client sought comfort," he said, gesturing at her like she was some wounded bird. Juliana nodded along, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she didn't need. I almost laughed. Abandoned? I'd been there, paying bills, fixing leaks, while she kissed my brother in our bed. Zara squeezed my arm under the table, a silent, "Stay calm," and I did. The lawyer kept going, claiming Juliana deserved half the house, the cars, the stocks, prenup be damned, because she'd contributed emotionally. It was garbage, and the judge's face didn't move, just stayed blank as stone. Then it was Zara's turn. She stood up, slow and deliberate, and laid it out like a builder setting bricks. "Your Honor," she said, her voice sharp but steady, "the house is in Caleb Rivers' name, purchased with his inheritance before the marriage. The prenup, signed by Mrs. Rivers 6 years ago, clearly states she has no claim to premarital assets." She slid the deed and the prenup across to the judge, then pulled out a folder, my notes, timelines, dates. "We have evidence of the affair," she said, calm as ever. Video from a security camera Mr. Rivers installed in the living room, showing Mrs. Rivers and Mr. Damien Rivers together, multiple times, in the marital home. She clicked a remote, and a grainy clip played on a small screen, Juliana and Damien, laughing, kissing, sprawled on my couch. The room went quiet, the slick lawyer's face tightening. Juliana's smirk vanished, her hand dropping the tissue. Zara didn't stop. She walked the judge through bank records, my accounts, untouched by Juliana's inheritance, and the eviction notice, served and completed. "Mrs. Rivers has her own wealth," she said, "but she has no legal right to my client's property. The prenup is airtight." She sat down, folding her hands, and I felt the air shift. The judge flipped through the papers, his pen tapping the desk, while Juliana whispered furiously to her lawyer. He stood again, stammering about emotional distress, but the judge cut him off. "I've heard enough," he said, his voice like gravel. He looked at Juliana, then me, and ruled, "The prenup stands. The house, the assets, they're Mr. Rivers. Mrs. Rivers retains her personal funds. Marriage dissolved." The gavel hit, a sharp crack, and it was over. Juliana shot up, her chair scraping the floor, her face red. "This is bullshit," she snapped, loud enough for the whole room to hear. The judge raised an eyebrow, but she didn't care. She turned on me, storming across the aisle as I stood to leave. "You think you've won? she hissed, her finger jabbing at my chest. You betrayed me, Caleb, acting like some saint when you're just a cold bastard. I looked down at her, her eyes wild, her perfect makeup cracking with sweat, and said, I gave you an easy exit, Juliana. You chose to make it ugly. She froze, her mouth open, no words coming out. Damien grabbed her arm, muttering, let's go, but she yanked away, glaring at me like she could burn me down with her eyes. I didn't blink. I turned, followed Zara out, and let the courtroom door swing shut behind me. Outside, the air was crisp, the sun low, and Juliana's voice chased me down the steps. You'll regret this, she shouted, her heels clicking as she stormed after me. I kept walking, Zara at my side, until we hit the parking lot. She's unraveling, Zara said, unlocking her car. Let her. I nodded, climbed into my truck, and watched in the rear view as Juliana yelled at Damien, her arms flailing, him shrinking back. I started the engine, the rumble drowning her out, and drove off. My phone buzzed. Layla, texting, how'd it go? I wrote back, it's done. I'm free. She sent a thumbs up, and I smiled, the first real one in hours. That night, I sat in my apartment, a beer in hand, the city lights flickering outside. The house was mine again, the marriage was ash, and Juliana had nothing but her money and her rage. I recorded a quiet exit episode, my voice low, talking about endings, not the loud ones, but the quiet ones that hit harder. The downloads would climb, I knew, but right now, it was just me and the mic, the weight of the day lifting off my shoulders. She'd expected chaos, tears, a fight she could win. Instead, I'd given her the truth, calm, cold, and final. She could cry in court all she wanted. I was already gone. I'm Caleb Rivers, and after the courtroom dust settled, I watched from a distance as the fallout I'd set in motion started eating away at Juliana and Damien, especially Damien. The divorce was final, the house was mine again, and I was back in my downtown apartment, lifting weights, cooking dinners, and letting quiet exit grow into something bigger than I'd ever planned. Juliana had walked out of court with her money and her maiden name, but the life she'd built on my back was gone. Damien, though, he didn't have her cash to fall back on, and I could see the cracks forming in him even from miles away. I didn't need to be there to know it. The whispers came to me through friends, through the town's gossip mill, and I let them paint the picture. My brother, the guy who'd smirked at me in my own bedroom, was sinking, and I didn't have to lift a finger to push him down. It started a few days after the ruling. Mike from the construction crew called me while I was at the gym, wiping sweat off my face between sets. Saw Damien at the bar last night, he said, his voice low over the clank of weights. Looked like hell, drunk, yelling about how Juliana screwed him over. I set the barbell down, catching my breath, and asked, what did he say? Mike laughed, short and dry. Said she blamed him for losing everything, kicked him out of her place. He's crashing on some buddy's couch now. I nodded to myself, the image clear, Damien, unshaven, slurring his words, trying to charm his way out of a hole he'd dug. I thanked Mike, hung up, and went back to lifting, the burn in my arms matching the quiet satisfaction in my chest. Juliana had turned on him, predictable, but faster than I'd thought. The story spread from there. Sarah texted me a week later, her words clipped. Damien called Dad, begging to come home. Dad hung up on him. I was in my kitchen, chopping onions for a stew, the knife steady in my hand. I could picture it, Damien's voice, desperate and whiny, Dad's silence cutting deeper than any words. I texted back, he make it quick? She replied, nope. Rambled for 5 minutes before Dad cut the line. I smirked, stirring the pot, the smell of garlic filling the room. Damien had burned that bridge the day he climbed into my bed with Juliana, and Dad wasn't the forgiving type, not for this. I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd made his choice, same as her, and now he was scrambling in the wreckage. Juliana wasn't helping him either. I heard from Layla, who'd gotten it from a friend of a friend, that she'd screamed at him in her fancy condo downtown, right in front of the doorman. You cost me everything, she'd yelled, her voice echoing off the marble lobby, according to the story. Damien had tried to calm her, hands up, but she'd shoved him out, slamming the door. I was with Layla when she told me, sitting on my couch with renovation plans spread out, new tiles for the bathroom, a deck out back. She shook her head, her dark hair falling over her shoulder. She's acting like he's the only one to blame, she said. I leaned back, sipping a coffee. She's always been good at pointing fingers. Layla nodded, flipping through paint samples, and we moved on. No need to dwell. But I could see it. Juliana, pacing her empty condo, Damien slinking off with a duffel bag, their little alliance crumbling under the weight of her pride. Damien's descent picked up speed after that. Mike saw him again, this time at a gas station, buying cheap beer and cigarettes with crumpled bills. Looked like he hadn't slept in days, he told me over lunch at the site, handing me a sandwich. Kept muttering about how you ruined him. I unwrapped the bread, took a bite, and said, I didn't ruin him. He did that himself. Mike shrugged. Yeah, but he's not big on mirrors. I laughed, the sound rough but real, and we ate in silence, the sun beating down on the lumber stacks. Damien blaming me wasn't new. He'd always been the type to dodge accountability, even back when we were kids breaking windows with baseballs. I'd take the heat then, but not now. He'd swung at me this time, and I just stepped aside, letting him fall. The town kept talking too. Damien tried hitting up old friends, the ones who'd stopped calling after the affair broke, but doors stayed shut. I heard he showed up at a poker night, uninvited, and got turned away politely, but firm. No one wants the drama, Sarah told me over the phone one night, her voice crackling from California. He's radioactive now. I was on my balcony, the city lights blinking below, and said, can't say I'm surprised. She sighed. He's still our brother, Caleb. I didn't answer right away, just watched a car horn blare in the distance. Not mine, I said finally, and she didn't argue. He'd lost Dad, lost Sarah's patience, lost the crew, lost everything but the story he kept telling himself, the one where I was the bad guy. Juliana's world was shrinking too, but she had her money to cushion the fall. Damien didn't. I didn't need revenge, watching him unravel was enough. One night, I recorded a quiet exit episode about it, not naming him, just talking about how betrayal doesn't just break trust, it breaks the betrayer, too, if they let it. The downloads spiked again, messages pouring in. This is my ex. I feel this. I read them in bed, the glow of my phone lighting the dark, and felt the distance grow. Damien was out there, crashing on couches, drowning in cheap beer, while I was here, building something solid, gym days, podcast nights, plans with Layla for a house that'd be mine again soon. I saw him once, by chance, a few days later. I was grabbing coffee at a corner shop, the line slow, when he stumbled in, a hair greasy, jacket stained, eyes bloodshot. He didn't see me at first, just shuffled to the counter, fumbling with coins for a pack of smokes. Then he turned, caught my eye, and froze. I didn't move, just stood there, cup in hand, waiting. Caleb, he said, his voice hoarse. I nodded, said nothing. He stepped closer, reeking of stale booze, and muttered, You happy now? I looked at him, my brother, or what was left of him, and said, I'm not unhappy. He blinked, like he didn't get it, then turned and shuffled out, the bell jingling behind him. I paid for my coffee, walked to my truck, and drove off. He was falling, and I was climbing two paths, one choice, and I picked mine. I'm Caleb Rivers, and months after the courtroom shut Juliana and Damien out of my life, I found myself standing on a rocky beach along the coast, the salt air stinging my face and a quiet I hadn't felt in years settling into my bones. The house was mine again, empty of their mess, waiting for Layla's renovation plans to turn it into something new. But I wasn't there yet. I'd taken a weekend trip with Layla to a design expo, a break from the gym, the podcast, and the steady rhythm I'd built in my downtown apartment. The waves crashed against the shore, loud and wild, and I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching the water churn. Juliana and Damien were ghosts now, fading into the background of a life I'd reclaimed, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of their betrayal pressing on me. It was peace, not the loud kind, but the kind that creeps in slow and stays. The expo was Layla's idea. She'd called me a week earlier, her voice bright through the phone. There's this thing on the coast, new furniture, lighting, stuff for the house. Come with me. I'd been sanding floors in the apartment, sweat on my brow, and said, yeah, why not? So we drove out, the truck rumbling along the highway, her sketching ideas in a notebook while I played old rock songs low on the radio. We checked into a small inn near the beach, 2 rooms with thin walls and creaky beds, and spent the first day wandering the expo booths full of sleek tables, lamps I didn't know I wanted, paint colors that made me think of the future. Layla moved through it all with this easy confidence, pointing out what would work in the house, asking my opinion like it mattered. This for the living room? She'd say, holding up a wood sample, and I'd nod, picturing it under my feet instead of Juliana's scuff marks. It felt good, building something with her, even if it was just plans. That night, we sat on the inn's porch, the ocean dark and endless beyond us, sharing a bottle of cheap wine she'd grabbed from a corner store. The air was cool, the kind that makes you pull your jacket tighter, and we talked, really talked, for the first time in a while. She asked me something I hadn't expected, her voice soft over the crash of waves. Why didn't you try to get back at them, Caleb? Juliana, Damien, you could have made it hurt more. I leaned back in the rickety chair, the wine warm in my throat, and thought about it. I could have fought dirtier, spread rumors, dragged them through the mud, but I hadn't. I didn't need revenge, I said finally, looking at her. I just needed to walk away while they watched the door close. She tilted her head, her dark eyes steady, and nodded like she understood. That's stronger, she said, and I felt the truth of it settle in me. Revenge would have kept me tied to them. Walking away cut the rope clean. The next day, we hiked along the coast, the trail winding through cliffs and scrubby trees, the expo forgotten for a few hours. Layla kept pace with me, her boots crunching on the gravel, and we didn't say much, just let the wind and the waves fill the silence. I thought about the house, the podcast, the life I'd been piecing together. Quiet Exit had hit 50,000 downloads last week, messages flooding in from people who'd been betrayed, who'd found their own way out. I'd started getting offers, sponsors, interviews, but I kept it simple, just me and the mic, telling the truth. The gym had carved my body into something stronger. The cooking classes had filled my kitchen with smells I loved. And Layla, well, she was there, steady and real, not pushing but not pulling away either. We stopped at a lookout, the ocean stretching out below, and she bumped my shoulder with hers. You're different now, she said. I nodded. Better, I think. Back in town, the house was waiting. I'd gone by a few days before the trip, the keys heavy in my hand, and walked through the empty rooms. Juliana and Damien had left it rough, scratches on the walls, a cracked sink, but it didn't feel like theirs anymore. I'd hired a crew to start the renovations next week. New floors, new paint, a fireplace I'd always wanted. Layla's sketches were pinned to the fridge in my apartment, a blueprint for something mine. I didn't need to erase them. I was overwriting them, layer by layer. That night at the inn, my phone buzzed. Juliana, a text out of nowhere. I never thought you'd let me go so easily. I stared at it, the screen glowing in the dark room, and didn't reply. Easily. It hadn't been easy. It had been deliberate, every step a choice to keep moving. I deleted the message, turned off the phone, and listened to the waves through the window. She didn't get it, and she never would. The drive back was quiet, the truck loaded with a few expo finds, a lamp, a rug, tucked in the bed. Layla hummed along to the radio, her notebook full of new ideas, and I felt the peace deepen. I dropped her off at her place, a little house with a messy garden, and she hugged me. Longer this time, her arms tight around my shoulders. See you soon, she said, smiling, and I drove home, the city lights welcoming me back. That night, I recorded a Quiet Exit episode about peace, not the absence of pain, but the presence of something stronger. The downloads climbed. The messages kept coming, and I read them in bed, the glow of my phone a small light in the dark. You're helping me heal, one said, and I closed my eyes, letting it sink in. The next day, I went to the gym, pushed through a heavy set, and cooked a steak dinner, the sizzle filling the apartment. I thought about Dad, still quiet but steady, Sarah checking in from California, the crew at the site who'd stuck by me. Juliana and Damien were out there, fading, her in her condo, him on some couch, but they didn't matter anymore. I'd built something new, not loud or flashy, but solid. Layla texted me a picture of the paint swatches we'd picked, and I smiled, the future taking shape. I lay back, the city humming outside, and felt it. Peace, real and mine. No ghosts left to chase away. They'd lost me, and I'd found myself, one quiet step at a time. I'm Caleb Rivers, and a year after I walked away from Juliana and Damien, I stood in a crowded bookstore downtown, the smell of fresh ink and coffee thick in the air, holding a copy of my memoir, The Book of Exits. It was launch night, and the place was packed. Friends from the construction site, gym buddies, even a few Quiet Exit listeners who'd driven hours to be there. The cover was simple, just my name and the title in bold white letters against a dark blue background, but it felt heavy in my hands, like every page carried the weight of the last 12 months. I'd turned the betrayal, the courtroom, the silence into words, hundreds of them, spilling out late at night in my apartment after the podcast took off. Now it was real, a bestseller within weeks of pre-orders, and I was here, not just surviving, but standing taller than I ever had. Juliana thought I'd beg her to stay, Instead, I'd written my way out, and she'd never see it coming. The idea started months ago, after that trip to the coast with Layla. Quiet Exit had hit 100,000 downloads, and the messages wouldn't stop. People saying my voice, my story, pulled them through their own messes. One night, I was cooking chicken in my apartment, the sizzle loud in the quiet, when a listener emailed me, "You should write a book. This is bigger than a podcast." I stared at the screen, the knife still in my hand, and thought about it. Why not? I'd already laid it all out on the mic, Juliana's smirk, Damien's fall, the calm I'd found. So I started typing. Nights after the gym, I'd sit at my tiny table, the city lights blinking outside, and write. It wasn't fancy, just me, telling it straight. The bedroom door I shouldn't have opened, the eviction notice, the courtroom gavel. I sent the first draft to Layla, nervous as hell, and she called me an hour later. "Caleb," she said, her voice warm, "this is you. Publish it." So I did. The bookstore buzzed now, people flipping through copies, some lining up for me to sign. Layla stood beside me, her dark hair pulled back, wearing a green dress that made her eyes pop. She'd been there from the start, renovating the house, listening to me ramble about chapters, keeping me steady without ever pushing. "You're a big deal now," she teased, nudging me as a guy in a Quiet Exit shirt asked for a photo. I laughed, awkward but real, and posed with him, the book tucked under my arm. The house was done now, new floors, a fireplace, that deep blue paint we'd picked, and I'd moved back in last month, the ghosts of Juliana and Damien scrubbed out. Layla had helped me hang curtains the day before, her laugh filling the rooms, and I'd caught myself watching her, wondering what this was becoming. Not yet, maybe, but close. A reporter from a local paper cornered me near the signing table, her recorder out, her questions sharp. "Caleb, your book's a hit, top 10 on the lists already. What do you think Juliana would say if she read it?" I leaned against the table, the crowds hum behind me, and thought about her, probably in her condo, counting her money, pretending she didn't care. "I don't know," I said honest. "She'd probably hate it. But it's not for her." The reporter pressed on. "If you could say something to her now, what would it be?" I paused, feeling Layla's eyes on me, steady and quiet. "Thank you," I said finally. "You handed me the scissors. I just chose to cut the rope." The reporter scribbled it down, nodding like it was gold, and moved on. Layla smiled, small but real, and squeezed my hand under the table. "Good answer," she whispered. The signing line stretched out after that. People clutching books, telling me their stories, cheating spouses, backstabbing friends, quiet exits of their own. A woman with tired eyes said, "Your podcast saved me. This book's gonna save someone else." I signed her copy, my hand steady, and thanked her, the weight of it hitting me. I wasn't just telling my story anymore, I was passing it on. Mike from the crew showed up, grinning, his wife beside him. "Never thought you'd be famous, man," he said, clapping my shoulder. I laughed. "Me neither." Dad was there too, in the back, quiet like always, but he nodded at me when our eyes met. A small thing, but enough. Sarah had sent a text from California. "Proud of you. Big bro, wish I could be there." I'd write her back later, tell her it was okay. The night wound down, the crowd thinning, and I sat with Layla at a corner table, the bookstore emptying out. She flipped through a copy, her fingers tracing the pages. "You did this," she said, looking up. "All of it, the house, the podcast, this." I leaned back, the chair creaking, and said, "Couldn't have without you." She didn't argue, just smiled, and we sat there, the quiet settling in like an old friend. I thought about Juliana and Damien, her fading in her rich little world, him still crashing on couches, according to Mike. They'd lost everything that mattered, not because I took it, but because they threw it away. I didn't need to see them suffer. I just needed to see myself rise. Later, I drove home, Layla in the passenger seat, the book launch glow still warm in my chest. The house welcomed me. New paint, new life, no echoes of them. I dropped my keys on the counter, the one Layla had picked, and she followed me in, kicking off her shoes. "You're a writer now," she said, leaning against the wall. I shrugged. "Just a guy with a story." She laughed, soft and easy, and we stood there, the space between us shrinking without either of us moving. I didn't kiss her, not yet, but I wanted to, and I think she knew. "Night, Caleb," she said, heading to the guest room, and I watched her go, the future hanging there, close enough to touch. I lay in bed, the house quiet, the book on my nightstand. The Book of Exits wasn't just about leaving. It was about what comes after, the life you build when the ashes settle. Juliana and Damien were gone, their regrets their own, and I was here, whole and steady. The podcast played on, the house stood strong, and Layla slept down the hall. I closed my eyes, the city distant now, and felt it. Freedom, peace, a story finished, but a life just starting. They'd handed me the end. I'd written the beginning.